This month's webinar is titled Managing Layoffs, Ensuring Legal and Ethical Practices. So for this month's webinar, we have our speakers joining us, Yvonne, Ezekiel, and Ivie Temitayo. We'll be discussing together around the webinar. I want to give Yvonne and Ivie the platform to introduce themselves briefly. I think Yvonne is here. You can unmute yourself, Ma.
Right. Hi everyone. My name is Yvonne Ezekiel. I'm actually a lawyer first before a HR person, or maybe the other way around. While I'm a lawyer first, I've been in HR for a very long time. I'm a HR practitioner. So actually, I see the designation there. I've actually moved on from there. So I'm actually back into practice now, mainly into employment law and labor law issues. So welcome to everyone.
I'm not sure.
I'll be sharing with you my
can see
lifelong experience in HR.
I'm not sure if you can see your video.
I have a video. I'm not sure why. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I forgot to put the screen up. Okay, there I am.
Great. Yeah. You're welcome. Okay, yes, you can keep yourself. Are you done introducing yourself?
Yes, I am. Yeah. I was hoping the next speaker would be speaking. So
yeah, Ivy will be joining us shortly. She's not here yet, but she'll be joining us shortly. So while she joins us, we can just go ahead and discuss around the webinar. So what prompted this webinar was a very popular video, a TikTok video we all saw on, I'm not sure everyone saw it, but the video was viral on Twitter and on TikTok of how an HR professionals, how HR professionals and managers were laying off a particular employee, and it was not a very pleasant one. So that was what bettered this webinar to help HR professional ensure ensure legal and ethical practices when they are laying off employees. So if you would you want to speak on it a bit, just around managing layoffs before the EBA joins in? So
okay.
Just a general knowledge on managing layoffs, yes, before we go into the discussion.
Yeah. So the question was what? General knowledge of managing employees or managing layoffs?
Managing layoffs. No, managing layoffs.
Right. Okay. Now, so the big thing about layoffs is clearly, employers always say that employees are their best assets, that they have. And then the question then becomes, so why then do we have to sort of have times where we have to lay employees off? Now, we do know that businesses go through down times and good times. So sometimes these times the bad times are inevitable. And for cost reasons, employers have to sort of take layout measures to lay off people. Now, the question is really about how do we manage that layoff? Because sometimes you could do it in a sensitive and compassionate way. Other times it can be done in such that it becomes a big blowout and it creates negative publicity for the company. So the process that is adopted is really what makes a difference in terms of managing these layoffs. Like I said, so the first thing I'm going into is why layoffs are necessary. So like I've said, there's a business reason for it, either because the business has had a downturn, there's a new focus for the business, so decide that maybe the making is no longer viable, so we want to create something else. And for that reason, you may not need as many people as before. Other times, the factory has decided to upscale itself in terms of capacity and automation, and therefore certain roles are no longer required. And then certain positions become obsolete because obviously you now have machines doing probably 3 times faster than humans can do it. So those are some of the reasons why the layoff is necessary. But the important thing is, like I said, is when you do these layoffs or when they are being carried out, to be doing in such a way that we are more compassionate towards the employee, and we're also thinking about those who have been left behind. Or we creating a whole pool of legal issues that may arise afterwards because of the way things have been carried out. So the things to bear in mind, obviously, is the labor law, first and foremost. That's sort of like the Bible that guides the way HR managers operate within an organization. So making sure that we're compliant with the labor law. If you have internal policies that also define how done this to be carried out, make sure also that you comply with that. You also need to look into the employment contracts of some of the employees as well. There may be some sort of contractual rights that have been built into those contracts that have specific requirements with regards to layoff and certain rights that they may have or certain benefits that may be accrued to them. So in mind. Although you need to also check whether you have any restrictive covenants that have been put into the employment contracts of your employees. For example, you may have things around anti-competition. You may say because of the kind of role they're performing, that should they ever leave, they might not, carry out those sort of responsibilities and compete against the company they're leaving. You may also have, maybe they're also handling very sensitive positions as well. And you may have non-disclosure clauses in their employment agreement. So you need to look at all of those things and then say to yourself, well, is the business willing to now waive these restrictive covenants, or do you want these covenants to remain in force even after they've left? So these things need to be borne in mind as you start to think through layoffs. And then the next thing also clearly, obviously, is a plan. So when you start to put your plan together for a layoff, what I probably would suggest is that perhaps you might want to consider a broad team of people. So you have somebody from legal, you have the HR person, you have somebody perhaps from operations, and somebody from marketing all put together, so that you're working as a team and trying to develop a very, what I would say, disparate or a different reason for, or criteria, selection criteria for deciding who should be laid off or not. Okay. But before you do that, also start to communicate to the employees. I don't think this whole thing should be shrouded in mystery. If the business is going through a downturn, it's best that the communication starts. You start to talk about the business, give updates about the business result. People start to see that, there's some kind of slide or downturn in the fortunes of the business. So they start to get a sense that something is happening. So by the time you start to talk about there's a possibility of a layoff, then you can even ask for, voluntary, if people want to voluntarily, retire or take up a voluntary redundancy. And that sort of start to build in people's mind that, okay, something is up, and the impact is not as harsh and damaging when you now finally decide that you want to have a large scale layoff. But I always say that, the role of the HR person is to be a business advisor, because if you don't, there's a regulatory impact on the company, there's a legal impact on the company, there's a societal impact on the company, there's also an organizational impact and also a business impact. In terms of, if you're not a business advisor to management, who you just keen in terms of, oh, we want to have layoffs, we want to save some money, we want to save the fortunes of the business. All you're thinking about is just, let's have a layoff, let's have a layoff. You need to be the business advisor, because these impacts in all of these areas that have consequences on the company in the long run for those who are left behind. So being a business advisor, the first thing you need to also think about is, even before a layoff, are there other things that we can do before we go into a layoff? Can we have a freeze on hiring? Can we start to think about how to merge roles and expand some sort of responsibilities? Can we think about things like, we have maybe temporary shutdown? So instead of opening 5 days a week, can we think about, okay, maybe we should do 4 days a week? Can have what we call a follow, where people can go off without pay for, so long as they agree to it, say for 6 months, and then come back. To think of all the other possibilities, because really, what is really driving a layoff at the end of the day is the bottom line. That's it. It's simply just the bottom line. So it's all about money. So you therefore need to help the business to think of other ways to save this money that they're thinking about, and come up with other options. And when you've exhausted all of these, then you can start thinking about, let's have a scale layoff for areas of business where we really now see that perhaps we really don't need as much people as we really have. So I'll leave you there for now to see if the other speakers around before we,
Yeah, yes,
continue.
Ivy is here now. Thank you very much. You've already taken us through managing the layoff process. I've gotten a whole lot from it. I would leave Ivy to introduce herself. Her video is okay, great. Her video is turned on now. Welcome, Ma. You're welcome. So I'll leave you to introduce yourself. While before you came in, we were talking generally around managing layoffs, and Yvonne has taken us through managing layoffs. So you could just give us some of the things that we should know generally around managing layoffs and introduce yourself. Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. First, I want to apologize. I am on maternity leave, so you will hear my baby screaming in the background. So please bear with me today.
Okay.
But thank you again to the Kendall Consulting team for having me. And I was really enjoying Yvonne's session as well. So good morning, Yvonne. It's very nice to meet you over here. My name is Ivy Temitayo Bitoye. I head employee experience at Sahara Group. I run two consulting firms, Elite Hunters and Work in Nigeria. Primarily help help corporate organizations to hire top talents, and we also manage human resources for them as well to ensure that they retain the top talents that they hire. Now, when we talk about layoffs, I know that it's not one of the things that organizations are very excited to do. And as Yvonne was saying, there are many reasons why layoffs would always come up as something that should happen. But the sensitivity of managing it for me is always the most important. There will always be good reasons for why you need to let people go. But how you choose to let people go also says a lot about your corporate organization. It says a lot to the people you're letting go. It says a lot to the people that you are not letting go. Because the way you treated my colleague would also make me feel, should I stay or should I just pack my load now and be going? And so the sensitivity in managing it is extremely important. And I thought that having this conversation with fellow HR professionals was also very necessary because we must all agree that HR is evolving. This is no longer the season where our job can fire. There's a lot more that we do as HR professionals, and we need to partner with our businesses more strategically, such that even before you even get to the point of a layoff, it will not be sudden. It will not necessarily be something that just fell on you per se. It will be something that you had strategically planned and began to prepare for in terms of how do you want to exit the people? Are there certain severance packages you want to give out? Do you want to give notice periods and the like? So I think that this this conversation is extremely important, and HR professionals have to always put in the people part of their hearts when they are doing this at all times. Thank you.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you. I think that was why we actually brought up the conversation. Before you joined, I was taking us through one of a viral video, a TikTok video, where someone was being laid off, and she was in tears. She was crying because she really wanted to know why she was being laid off. It was not really handled well. It had legal implications around it. They were not telling her what she needed to know, and that was what brought up this conversation. So thank you very much, ma'am, for taking us through that. It's something very important that HR professionals should know. So yes, I would be asking a question around what are the key legal considerations that organizations need to be aware of when planning and executing layoffs? What are those things they should have in mind when they are planning layoffs? I think I'll give that to Yvonne to discuss.
Yes, thank you very much, Ebube. Like you said, earlier said, you know, the labor law is should I say, the Bible for HR. So we need to make sure that we are compliant with the labor law. And I also mentioned internal policies. If you have internal policies that you communicated to your employees that these are the policies of the company when it comes to redundancy, this is the way to carry out a redundancy, and these are the packages that go with redundancy, then you make sure you better comply with that also. You also need to look into the employment contracts, because those contracts are documents that can be tendered in court as evidence. So you need to make sure that whatever terms you have included in an employment contract, you've got to abide by them, especially when it comes to terminations or exits from a business, or or severing your contracts, your relationship with an employee and an employer. Now, you also need to minimize any sort of liability risk. So make sure that when you draw up your plan for separation, you must ensure that it's very, very objective. So whatever criteria you decide to come up with has to be one that you can defend. Should anybody decide they want to litigate against their separation from the organization. So you must make sure they're objective. Some people do use the rule of first in, first out, meaning, or sorry, last in, first out. You could have that as your objective. Also, the rule of not trying to be ageist, but you could say, people who have been in the business for over 50 years or 40 years, maybe, you want to give them a separation package and so on. But just ensure that whatever criteria you come up with, there's no disparate treatment between any groups of people, whether you have those who have been in the business for a long time or those who have just come in a few months. Just make sure that, the treatment you give to them are the same. And in terms of package, it has to be very, very clear what you're communicating to the employee. Whatever severance package you give to them, you have to communicate that to them. And they shouldn't find out via WhatsApp message or via some text message that they've been fired or laid off. You have to ensure that you must have a very clear communication plan and involve your line managers, because they are key to ensuring that communication happens. So communication is the key to ensuring that, whatever you do is ethical and legal. So long as there's a lot of information that is passed on to the employee, they probably understand. They're humans, so they'll probably understand. I guess, and like other speakers said, you as a HR person, you should already know that something's happening, because if you have been a business partner to the business, so what's going to happen? So it shouldn't be a surprise to you that you have to lay people. And like I said, you need to consider other actions even before you get to a layoff. So you need to think about all the other things that you can do before you agree to a layoff. And your job is not just to hire and fire, but to advise the business and think about all the other things that you can do to support the business. Because at the end of the day, it's about the bottom line. It's about the numbers. The numbers aren't adding up. The business will be jittery. So it's about helping the business to understand that there are things that can be done, and you want to ensure that the cost that it's trying to save is saving it from litigation, because we haven't done things the proper way. So it's about communication, respect for the employee, and giving them enough communication to understand what's going on, and make sure that the severance package is as already agreed and determined by business, and not because we start to see the numbers and we start trying to find ways to remove certain allowances because we think that we're paying out too much. So give the employee exactly what we have said we're going to do and what they deserve. And that should, I think, in a way, should help in terms of planning for layoffs.
Yeah, I think, yes, thank you very much, Mark, for that. One thing that stood out for me is communicate. It's something that is expected, and communication is very, very key in managing layoffs, and just avoiding some other errors that might come up. Communication is very key. So, Ibie, do we want to add something to that?
No, I think that Even has covered it. I think most importantly is for you to know the law in terms of what applies to you, even if you're not based in Nigeria. So one of the things, for example, when you work in a multinational, the terms for disengagement in Nigeria is different from the terms of disengagement in Kenya or in Ghana, right? So you need to make sure that you know the law per your country. It's also important that you seek legal guardians. Always speak to your legal team, because there are many things that are happening right now in industrial labor courts that are not necessarily spelled out in the Nigerian labor law, but the courts are insisting on. So I'll give an example. Termination. You want to terminate someone because of a disciplinary issue. The court will always insist now that you give a fair hearing. Even if your sanction says if the person does this, we should terminate. You just don't go and terminate. You must always have a DC hearing to give the person opportunity to explain themselves, right? So it's always important to work alongside with your, it's always important for you to work alongside with your legal team as well. A couple of other things I wanted to say was try and stay away from anything that could be seen or gleaned to be discriminatory as well. A lot of times, you are just thinking of it from a logical perspective, but you fail to realize that when somebody looks at this outside of the organization, it can be termed to be discrimination as well. So even when you're doing a layoff, you have to be very sensitive, because you can somewhat feel like, oh, they are only letting go people from this culture. And maybe that could have even been a coincidence. And you just didn't pick up on it. So you need to make sure that you're picking up on such things and then ensure that your strategy covers you for that. Another thing is, in addition to what Yvonne said, was establish your clear why. Why are you terminating? Why are you laying people off? It must be clear to everybody. Don't leave it vague for people to give different interpretations or misunderstanding. No, let it be clear, be very transparent in the reason for why you're letting people go. And then provide adequate notice or payment in lieu. And if your organization can offer more than what is even contractual in this time and age, please consider it. The economy is crazy. So this is why it's important that now just try and consider, okay, yes, normally we will give 1 month, but maybe we can do something extra because it's not easy. Organizations are not hiring as much. So when you're letting people go, where are they going to, basically? And then you can also try your strategy by considering other alternatives. As opposed to laying off, can we say, okay, we're reducing man hours? Can we say we're reducing work hours? Can we say we're crashing salaries first? So even if you know your end goal is I want to terminate, you can do it subtly such that the blow is not really, really hard felt by the people as well. And then try to see how you can provide support. One of the things we did in my organization, when we have situations where we're laying off people, we always have our mental health consultants available for in case you need to talk, you need somebody to vent to. We always have that that's fully paid for as well. So those are some of the things I just wanted to add.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ivy. That is very, very helpful. I think one thing again that people have concerns around, HR professionals have concerns around, is how to manage conversations around layoffs, how to manage difficult conversation. And that is where our next question is tilted to: what steps would you advise companies and HR professionals to take to communicate layoffs transparently and compassionately to affected employees?
Can I let if you take that first?
Yeah, if you want to do that.
Just to be clear, so what you're asking is, what steps do we take to ensure that the communication is transparent to people that we're laying off, right? So one of the things that
compassionate to people being affected.
So one of the things I would say is, if you are letting off a few people, like a group of people, the first thing is have a heart-to-heart conversation. Like Yvonne had said, let them not find out on social media. They should be the first to know, and they should be the first to know face-to-face. Don't be cold. Don't send a WhatsApp message to their line manager and say, tell Kelechi not to come again on Monday. So you actually have to have a heart-to-heart conversation with these people. You need to also be transparent in terms of the books. So if you're saying we're letting people go because our business is not making money, you need to be able to show them the numbers. Say, look, this is how much we're spending on payroll. This is how much we're spending on this. This is what you are bringing in. It's just not sustainable as well. You need to get to that emotional part that makes them even begin to feel sorry for you. That they'll be the ones saying, we understand why you have to let some of us go, right? So make sure that you are clear, you're very transparent and very open. Make sure you have a heart-to-heart, face-to-face conversation as much as you can. And make sure that while you're doing that, you are also conscious of the fact that this is going to be painful, this is going to hurt. So you have to also go there with an empathetic mindset as well to provide alternative support. So at the same time, you're saying we're letting you people go, you're also saying, in addition to letting you go, we're going to do this for you. However, we're going to support you for this period of time. We're going to do this, all those sort of things. We're going to give you guys good recommendation letters, anything that you think would just make it a bit more softer for them. That's my recommendation.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Yeah, I think Vivian has captured it quite nicely. The only thing I'll probably just add is communication is very key, but involve the line managers as well. The people who actually manage these individuals and, see them, because as a HR person, you can't talk to about 300 people. So you need to ensure that the line managers are carried along and they can communicate to the individual. Give them, I'll call sort of like a checklist, so that they're saying exactly the same thing to everyone and exactly what you want them to tell them. Okay. And then, like she said, as you're communicating to them about what's happening, you're communicating the soft landing for them as well. Or we're going to have some sort of financial literacy program for you, because we're going to be giving you, tell them the package they're receiving as well, so they know. And they, so we're going to support you with some financial literacy. You need to manage yourself. You can even tell them, we will give some time off to go to a job search if you wish to do that. And then, and so that's it. So as you're communicating the bad news, you're communicating the good news as well. So the support you're going to provide to give them some sort of soft landing.
Yeah, so providing some sort of soft landing, doing it appropriately. You don't do it via text message. Have a conversation, a heart-to-heart conversation with them. And Empathetic. Yes, so thank you very much. I think that covers that question. One thing again we would like to know, I think Yvonne mentioned it that when you lay off some certain employees, the ones that are left behind are actually affected to a certain level. So what support do you want to, would you advise we give to such employees to maintain their morale and productivity? Because somehow their productivity is affected, their morale is affected. How do you advise we support employees of such? I think if you can do that.
Okay, so I was going to say that we've already said quite a number of things, but I think transparent communication again. Yes, it is important for you to communicate to people that you're exiting, but you also need to communicate to the people that you're not exiting. You need to openly communicate with them about the reason for the layoffs, the impact on the organization, and what the future outlook of the business looks like. Because when you're transparent, it helps to build trust amongst the employees and also helps them to understand the context behind the reason why you're making those changes. The second thing is you also need to make sure that you are providing support and counseling available to them as well. So, for example, if you're laying off the line manager of a strong team, your people are going to feel weak. They're going to feel like, oh, our covering has been removed. So you need to make sure that you provide adequate support for them as well. If you're removing a line manager, do you have somebody that's going to be filling in? Can that person really manage the team and get them to settle in and just help them to cushion the emotional impact of the layoff of losing their line manager? And then you also need to be intentional about reassuring job security. If it was any of us, if we woke up tomorrow and realize that they sacked 30 people from our organization, what's going to be in your mind is who is next. So you need to reiterate your organization's commitment to you guys that are remaining in the business and reassure them about their job security and provide clarity on how the layoffs even happened and why those were the selected people, if you can, as well. And then clarify your expectations as well. So now that layoffs have happened, what are my expectations of you people that are remaining in the business? What do we require from you guys? What kind of support do we require? What will job expectations really look like at this point as well? And then ensure that you're also fostering a positive work environment. So make sure that your environment is now very supportive, very inclusive. Your employees are feeling very well valued, they're feeling respected, they're feeling motivated as well. So employee engagement has to be top of your mind at that time to ensure that you're engaging your people intentionally. Thank you.
Employee engagement is priority for those that are left in the organization. So Yvonne, do you want to add something?
Yes, I mean, to just say, it's about open communication with the people like all the survivors that have survived the layoff. Okay, so you need to, if you're not open with your communication, it will be filled by the rumor mill. So nature abhors vacuum, and there's a vacuum, and then somebody else fills it, and what will fill it is not the truth. And then that becomes even a bigger damage to you. So you must communicate what has happened, tell them the truth, like you say, show them the numbers. They need to know how the business is doing so that they understand. And then, of course, because their friends have left, they're, people that they know that they perhaps work with on a daily basis have left. So it's going to have some sort of impact on them emotionally. So you have to create some sort of mechanism that allows them to get open feedback about how they feel and, some sort of counseling that can help them cope with what has happened. Because some people cope with it in different ways. For some people, it's a grave loss. For others, they can. But for some others, it's huge. And so, like if you had said, they'll be thinking, well, am I going to be next? So you need to be able to tell them, obviously, tell them what the future is all about and assure them of their position and role within the organization. And if you require any reskilling or training because of expanded roles, then do so. Put in some sort of training, have some training to ensure that they can cope with the new roles that they're taking on or because they've expanded their responsibilities. And so those are some of the things I would add to what you have said.
Yes, reskilling, clarifying expectation, what's expected of them, communicate, tell them what's expected of them, reskill and all. Yes, thank you very much. That was helpful. So I would ask something else. How can HR leaders balance the legal necessity of confidentiality during layoffs and the ethical considerations of open communication? How can HR leaders balance legal necessity of confidentiality during layoffs with the ethical consideration of open communication? How would you advise HR leaders to balance both? Yvonne? Hello.
Okay. So what I would say is, So what I would say, well, you need to start to, communication is important, like I said. we need to let people know exactly what's going on. So start to create the sense of urgency, not fear, but in terms of this is the state of the company. This is state of nation. See what the new plan for the future, because we're thinking of buying new machines now and so on. So you begin to communicate, and then also have consultative discussions with, if you have employee consultative groups, start to have discussions with those groups to understand what is happening. And then you can then start to announce, plans for layoffs, and start and call for what I would say voluntary redundancies. Okay. Now, then put a broad team in place that will support you in terms of the criteria that you're defining. People understand what's going on, and the team can in creating your criteria selection, or should I say the selection criteria rather. Okay, and give people advance notice. So let's not shroud this whole thing in mystery. It's not a mystery. How the business is doing is not mysterious either. If you're sharing those information, you're giving people an update of what's going on in the business, and then you start to talk about maybe some sort of expansion or closing of some lines of business, then people start to understand what's going on. So then you now talk about a layoff, it doesn't become news anymore. So those who have now been selected to be laid off, ensure that you give advance notice so they know what's going on. And like I said, you can balance it by having some people who can call for voluntary redundancies. There are people who'll be willing to go. And of course, the involuntary ones are the ones that would now fit into your selection criteria that you now decide you want to let go. And of course, like I always say, your line managers have to be part of it, because you don't want a situation where they say this, but they have to have some sense of ownership. So here's the company, and here's what the company wants to do. We're all in it together. So, you can't keep it mystery. So you must let people know what's going on. It's only when you keep it in mystery that they think something is happening, and they start to think something unethical is going on, and people start to come up with all sorts of stories, and it can likely jeopardize the entire plan that you have. So communication is key, okay? But it's about the right time to communicate. Once you're clear what it is, then you can start to communicate what's going on.
Yeah, I think one thing that's wrong here, like music, is communication. It is key, and communicating at the right time. Yes, I think when you mentioned the line manager being away, it took me back to the video. The line manager was not in that the session where they were laying her off, and she kept asking for a line manager, but the line manager was not available at that time, and that just took her off, because she was like, her line manager is the person she reports closely to, and would be able to speak on this. So communication and transparency is just very key. So Eve, do you want to speak on this too?
No, I think Yvonne covered it. I don't really have anything else to add.
Okay, great. So I think one last thing I would be asking before we move to the question sessions. There are some questions in the comments. What ongoing support and resources should the organization provide to employees who have been laid off to assist in their transition? What support would you advise to assist in employee transition? Yes, if you can think you can do that.
I think we've already touched on that. We had talked about the fact that
I think so.
mental health support, give recommendation letters as well. Even giving adequate notice in itself is part of the support as well. Severance packages, layoff packages, and so forth.
I think the mention is key too. Yes.
So we have spoken about that extensively.
Okay, so great. Thank you very much for the session. So let's just move into the questions from our participants. I'll start with the last one here. Is notice period necessary for redundancy? How about a forced stop after in lieu payments?
Yes, notice period is necessary for redundancy. Any form of exit, notice period is required. So think about it again in terms of your employment contract. Your employment contract obviously talks about termination. When somebody is redundant on a role and you're terminating the person's contract, it's still a termination. So notice period is still necessary. Now, in terms of a forced stop after in lieu payment, you pay in lieu because you're already forcing the person to leave early. So that's why the in lieu payment even comes up at all. So you give a forced stop and then you pay an in lieu payment, basically. Thanks.
Okay. Another question would be, in some clients, line managers are charged with the responsibility of communicating layoffs to staff affected. But what is mostly applicable here in Nigeria is for HR to handle the communication. What are your thoughts and best practices in this regard? I think we even spoke on it here now.
Please, let me just express myself. One of the biggest challenges I have with practicing HR in Nigeria is that HR does a lot of things that HR should not be doing. It is not your job to terminate. It is not your job. Your job is to support, to advise, to provide counsel and direction, but it's a responsibility of the line manager. But a lot of times here in Nigeria, HR does everything. My belief is that your line manager is the HR that you know, first of all. HR is at the back end to provide support. So I would say that it's always the responsibility of the line manager. It's not the responsibility of HR. HR can help you to advise in terms of contractual obligations, ensuring the severance packages are put together, ensure you have the termination letters and so forth. But it's not your responsibility to lay off a staff. It is the line manager's responsibility to have that conversation and engage.
I couldn't agree more with Evie. It's absolutely the job of the line manager to do that. The best that we can do is provide them with guidance in terms of, because some people, let's be honest, some people don't know how to have difficult conversations. So you can support them with that in terms of giving them a structure, in terms of how they can carry out that conversation. But at the end of the day, it's the responsibility to do that. So our job is to support them.
Okay, great. I think that answers that question. There are a lot of questions here, but we are just going to pick at random and answer the questions because of time. What does the law provide for on severance package?
I would have loved to answer that, but that person should go and study the Nigerian labor law.
Okay, because so would you suggest that an organization make extra financial commitments aside payment in lieu of notice when contracts are terminated?
So I don't know if it's a case of suggestion per se. It's also what is the capacity of your company? What can your company actually handle? Remember again that as HR people are strategic business partners. So are you asking for beyond 1 month payment in lieu? You want the company to do X, Y, Z? Is it financial? Is it something that the company can afford? So you need to be looking at it from that perspective. I don't know if Yvonne has a different.
Sorry, I missed the question. Sorry, somebody distracted me here.
Okay, it said, would you suggest that an organization make extra financial commitment aside payments in lieu of notice when contracts are terminated?
I mean, if the company chooses to be benevolent enough to do that, then they can, but not mandated by law to do that. So that's the thing, they're not mandated. Sometimes you do that because you think it's best to do it, you want to create for compassion's sake, but these guys have worked with me for such a long time, and you think that you can afford it, why not? Yeah, but it's not, you're not mandated. The company's not mandated to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I hope that answers Olakunle's question. Yes, another question. I'm moving to just scrolling through to see if there are some questions. Okay, I think this is interesting. Is rudeness and being defensive to taking on feedback enough grounds for laying off an employee? Bearing in mind that the employee is a Gen Z and had previously worked directly with the group CEO and now finding it difficult to flow with the new system structure being put in place. Kindly advise on the best way to manage
Is there somebody
such an
sleeping? Sorry, I'm hearing snoring on
Yeah.
Is that somebody sleeping?
I can hear someone snoring too. I've been hearing it for a bit.
Okay. I'm just trying to even mute the person.
Okay.
So we can just speak to that while I yes.
So I think for me, right, the rudeness and being defensive is a symptom of a bigger problem, right? And when you get to a point where you're saying, I want to let this person go because they're being rude, I don't think it's necessarily because they're being rude. It's a culture fit problem and it's a competency problem, behavioral competency problem, right? If you have a culture that says that you speak to people respectfully and this particular person doesn't speak to people respectfully, it is a reason for you to let someone go because it's a culture fit and behavioral competency problem. It's just that you must make sure that your disciplinary policy supports this, and you must make sure that it is also it has been documented over time. So the person has been given warning, the person has been a verbal warning, written warning. You don't just wake up and say you're rude to me, I'm firing you. No, you must build your case so that you can then pinpoint. I've had situations where someone was very rude to a line manager. She used the F word to speak to the line manager. And we knew we were going to fire her, but we didn't fire her until like 1 year later. We all kept quiet, first moved her to this department, first did this, built the case, and then you can let go because it's actually a behavioral competency problem.
Yeah. The only thing, So the only thing I would say is in instances like this, we don't need to wait until we hear.
Sorry, Yvonne, you are muted.
Sorry, I'm
Okay,
muted.
sorry. Okay, sorry. So I would say we don't need to wait until there's a layoff in order to take a decision like this. So if somebody has a behavioral problem and we've documented it and so on, I think we need to take the tough decision even before the layoffs, because it's really unfair to those that we're laying off, because we're laying off people because there's a business need now. So if there's a behavioral problem or there's a disciplinary problem, deal with it at that point in time, and you don't need to wait for a layoff. That's my point. You can have that person exit the business because of their behaviors or what they have done. And but like if you have said, ensure that it's all properly documented. So that it's not a case of, because when you add it to the layoffs, for example, that person can turn around and say you're laying me off because for some discriminatory thing, whatever the case may be. You want to ensure that you have the right information and evidence to back up what you're doing. But I would say we don't need to wait until we have a layoff. I'll do it even before that layoff.
Yeah. I think there will just be little signs from it.
You don't want if I'm paying people 100 million because I'm laying them off, I don't think that person deserves to get that, just for an example, So why categorize that person and join them into some sort of big layoff scheme? Because if you don't give them that money, then they'll probably you're discriminating against them. So take their case out and deal with it as it is and what it is, and then deal with layoffs as layoffs.
Okay, I think that answers that cultural fit. Another question here is so in the case of a takeover or merger, how do you know or categorize the persons to be laid off?
So I would say that typically that's why I talked about HR people being strategic business partners, right? So if you already have an idea of where the business is headed with this new merger, what are our goals, what are our visions, what do we want to achieve? You also know the skills and competencies that are required in terms of what you need to take the business to the next level and with this merger. And then you have also assessed the people that work within your business. You've done job evaluations, you've done people evaluations, you've assessed to be able to know who has the capabilities and the capacity to be able to take the business to the next level and fit all of the skills and competencies that you require. It will be easy for you to know the low-hanging fruits and people that you can let go of. There will be some roles that you realize that you don't need any longer. There will be some roles that you realize you can merge. There will be some specific competencies that you realize that with the merger, we already have AI solving that. So we no longer need this person to do that. So those are some of the ways that you can know who you need to keep and who you need to let go.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I don't think there's anything else
Yvonne, do you want to add to that?
Has said it. No, there's nothing else. She said it quite eloquently, and I agree with all she said. Certainly, there's no point duplicating roles. When you know that there are roles that exist between the two. So instead of duplicating, just obviously decide who you're going to let go. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Is using performance appraisals to determine affected employees backed by law, or it has to be by people?
Say that again.
Is using performance appraisals to determine affected employees backed by law, or it has to be by people?
It has to be by what?
People. I don't know what. Maybe the person wants to clarify what the FIFO is.
And I'm not answering any question that has to do with us talking about the Nigerian labor law. Go and read your Nigerian labor law.
Okay, so we have been advised to go and read the Nigerian labor law to get abreast with it as HR professionals.
Yeah. But
so
I'll just say the same thing. Sorry, I would say the same thing like we had said before when somebody asked about, somebody who's, you did get the example of a Gen Z and so on. So if somebody has a performance problem issue, like I said, deal with it as they come along, and document that, because you don't want to you may want to lay people off, but you don't want to have disparate treatment, like you mentioned before, where you're saying, I'm laying these people off, but this person is not going to get a donors package, but these people will get a donors package. And if your reason for that is because they had a previous issue, so the question will be, why did you deal with it at that point in time? So let's declare what a layoff is and not try. Okay. Did you understand?
Great. Yes.
You heard me? Okay.
Yes, we heard you.
All right. Okay.
Okay, yeah, thank you for that.
Okay, so I noticed that we were muted. So I wanted to I browsed through the chat. I just want to answer a few questions in another 5 minutes because I have another meeting. So first of all, somebody called Zara Zaki had asked for advice for someone who wants to build an HR team for a business from scratch. Do you do mentorship for HR professionals? I do mentorship for HR professionals. You can reach out to me on Instagram. My PA would attend to you to help you develop how you can build your own HR department from scratch. Somebody had said there was an interesting question. With the pension scheme in place, is gratuity compulsory as part of the severance package? And the answer is no. Gratuity is now purely discretionary to your organization. It is no longer compulsory. Some organizations see it as double payment. If I'm already contributing to your pension fund, when you think, why am I paying you gratuity again, right? Then Margaret is asking, she says, if the contract says pay 1 month in lieu, if you pay 2 months in lieu, can you force stop them? And I'm saying that the payment in lieu only comes when you are for stopping someone already. If, for example, the requirement is that if I'm terminating somebody, I give you 1 month notice, and I'm saying I want to terminate you today, I'm now required to pay you 1 month in lieu. That is what it says. That's the first stop. So it doesn't matter if you want to pay the person 1 year salary. The first stop happens, and that's when in lieu payment even comes up to even be considered at all, right? Somebody else said, what is the industry standard for FMCGs in terms of in lieu payment? I haven't worked in FMCG, so I can't really speak to that. Then says, what about in the case of theft? Do you still give notice period? So the first thing is, what does your disciplinary policy say? Most organizations' disciplinary policy would say that theft is a gross misconduct, and for theft, the sanction is immediate dismissal.
Immediate dismissal.
Period. So you need to make sure that your DC policy is very explicit and covers you for things like that. Now, in terms of the Nigerian labor law and what your DC policy says, now the Nigerian labor law will not tell you this is the sanction for every single thing. They would defer to your DC policy, but make sure that you follow through on the provisions of DC policy when you are laying off anybody for any reason.
Yeah.
So, I won't be able to stay much longer. I have another meeting. I'm so sorry, but I really want to appreciate Kendall Consulting for today. And I had a great time chatting with everybody. It's very nice to meet you again, Yvonne. I wish you guys a very, very great day ahead.
Thank you very much. So we just have like 7 more minutes. No, let's say 3 more minutes. So we could just quickly run through some of the questions in 3 minutes, and then we close out for today. Yes. So I think there's one question here. Layoffs and terminations are 2 different categories of involuntary exits. Layoff mostly are business performance, while terminations could be as a result of performance, disciplinary, or cultural misfits. Okay, I think that's a comment.
That's a comment.
Yes, can leave days substitute for notice of disengagement from the employee. Can leave days substitute for notice of disengagement from the employee. I'm not sure what that is. Yes. Okay, so okay, I think Temitope touched through every one of them. So we'll just be closing out for today. Do you have any last final comments for HR professionals as regards this?
Like I said, I think my comment is that we should always remember that we are business partners to the firm, to the business. We are not just there to hire and fire. So it means when they are layoff done, we already should know that this going to happen, because we are business advisors. And like I said, we should always think about the impact beyond just the employee. There's regulatory impact that can come from. There's a societal impact, for example, even where a business is located and lay off, perhaps that might be the only business in that community. So you're laying off people who are affected within the community. So there's a societal impact, and there's an organizational impact for those who are left behind, thinking, if you haven't done it right, they're going to be thinking, if our employer can treat my colleagues like this, then really, should I continue to stay in this organization? Will they treat me the same way? And then, of course, it has a business as well. So you should always remember that if you think like business people, because we are business advisors, and that's the way we should tackle layoffs as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your contribution and your time. We'll be closing the webinar now. Thank you, and see you. Yes, thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the participants.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We'll see you again by March. Please stay updated on our social media platforms, yes, to get updated. Thank you very much. Bye.
Were you talking to me?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Sorry?
Thank you.
Okay. Can I
I
sign
said
off now?
thank you.
Okay. You're
Yes,
welcome.
yes.
All
Thank
right.
you very much.
All right. You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.
trendybeats.com.
Magic, oh yeah. I feel a certain way